excited for this event. As you can see, it's being recorded, so if you have any issue there, just let us know. But we're excited to partner with Melissa and the Furious Gravity Fearless Women, Furious Fearless Women, to bring this event to you all this evening. Yeah, how's everybody doing? I know I have you all on mute, but just like some little visual cue. Nice, great. So I've shared the program in the chat box, but I think that if you join after I share it, you can't see it, so I'll periodically just keep dropping it in there. We will go in order of, the readings will go in order of the bios that are in the program. But for those of you who have never attended an in-person inner loop, really our goal is to foster community and collaboration and just a sense of togetherness among DC area writers, because so often our literary pursuits are solitary in nature. So we try to create a venue where we can, join together and either celebrate or commiserate whatever day it may be for you. Rach, do you want to clue us in on a few other updates? I should say I'm Courtney also, by the way. I'm co-founders. And I've been furiously editing, so I'm in that writer's high. I apologize. Rachel, take it away.
I also have been on a writing retreat, so I feel a little loopy and crazy, so I apologize ahead of time. But it is so wonderful to see our community gathering together. It's been a very challenging couple of weeks and few months for everyone. And I think it's the most important time for us to be gathering as a community and recognizing our community members. So I just want to thank everyone for joining. I think we're like at record turnout right now.
Virtual turnout?
Virtual turnout, right. So that's really exciting. Courtney and I are continuing to brainstorm ways of serving you guys during the quarantine and during while things are still very questionable. One of the things that we are going to start doing is publishing little mini episodes of the podcast every Friday. And basically we're going to feature a different person every week to talk about inspiration and how they're continuing to write in the current circumstances, and also a writing prompt to just get people writing, because we're all feeling a little out of ourselves. So I think could be helpful to hear how other people are handling it, but also just, here's something to write about. Don't think too hard. Don't, try to control it, just write it. So that's what we'll be doing with the podcast, which is called The Inner Loop Radio. And it's on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts.
All over the place.
Courtney is launching the summer residency program this summer, and we're hoping to get the residents in the space in a safe way. So we've been working really hard on that as well.
Yeah. We closed out submissions for our first ever writers contest last Friday. So Rian Scott is in the process of judging the finalists, and they will be published in the July issue of District Freight magazine. So that's our first foray into the printed word as the inner loop. I also just want to give a quick shout out, to all of you for being here, for showing up, for putting in the energy and the time and sharing with us. So claps to everyone, thank you. B, to Dan Knowlton, who is one of our board members and has become official Zoom tech guru and will be shepherding us through the evening. And then also to our amazing interns, Kira and Abby, who have been just invaluable over the past few months. So we are grateful to have them on board. The way
I was going to say a quick rundown of how we've been working the Zoom version of our events. So the first thing that we want to do is encourage everybody to use the chat and give visual cues. Although while people are reading, they can pretty much only see themselves. So the chat is the place to send encouragement or reactions. We found that that's a really nice way of giving the author that immediate feedback that you normally get from the audience that is going to be absent in the virtual version. So definitely use the chat. And then the other thing that we did in the last event that turned out to be quite successful, I think, is in order to recreate the community aspect of interloop events during intermission, we will be putting everybody into breakout groups where we're going to encourage you to chat with each other on a more micro level. Don't be intimidated. It's totally optional. But I always say, and I'll say again, that we all have writing in common. So we can always talk about writing or literature, a love of literature. So it should be easy to talk to each other. And we're probably all itching to talk to people in the current circumstances.
You are, of course, also welcome to like go pee or refill your drink or do whatever it is you need to do. Maybe like sculpt on some dinner. That's so don't feel obligated, but it's an opportunity should you want to take advantage of it. Yeah, I think that's it for our long drawn out introduction. Other than to say submissions are open. We won't have a July event. We never do, but we'll return again in August. So feel free to submit if you would like to. And as we like to say around here, without further ado, we're gonna get started. We're super, super excited to have Lauren Francis-Sharma joining us this evening as our featured reader. She is the author of Book of the Little Axe, which just came out in May. Congrats, Lauren. And Till the Well Runs Dry, which debuted in 2014 and was shortlisted for the William Saroyan International Prize, awarded the Honor Fiction Prize by the Black Caucus of the American Library, and awarded the Honor Fiction Prize by the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. Lauren is a child of Trinidadian immigrants. She's written about the Caribbean in both of her novels and the story of her grandmother's journey to the United States. The inspiration behind her acclaimed first novel was the subject of a feature article in both the Post and the Sun. Holler to those local papers. Lauren is the owner of the DC Writers Room, which is really rad. You should check it out. She's not anymore, but it was a thing. Also still rad. She's is this still correct, Lauren? The assistant director at Breadloaf? Yeah, which is super, super cool. If anyone gets a chance to head up to Vermont, you should go to Breadloaf and retreat yourself in the woods at Middlebury, and she is a McDowell Fellow as well. She lives in the Maryland burbs of DC with her husband and 2 children. Yes. And she's always, like many of us, working on another book. So we are very excited to welcome you, Lauren. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I was the proprietor of DC Writers Room, and I sold it to another wonderful writer, Donna Hemans, who also has a book out. Yeah, so still in the community, which is great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited. I, of course, wish that I was at a bar with you all.
Us too.
But, you know, I have my tea, which isn't quite the same, but we'll make do. So I, yes, as Courtney mentioned, Book of the Little Axe came out in May 12th. And it's been quite a time to launch a book, but we're doing our best. And so I'll just read a little bit. I think the story is set in 2 places, mostly Trinidad and the American West, which actually in a place that will become Montana, but it's Bighorn Mountain. And the story opens with a boy who is the son of our heroine of the story. And I think I'll start at the beginning of the story, and then I'll explain a little bit more and just read a little further into the book. So it's 1830. Only 6 of the 7 boys saw it. Its teasing figure stilled inside a quiet wind. It was as if it wished to be seen, and indeed it was, between blades of frosty golden grasses, from the branches of a chilled cedar. The boys watched it in the silver light of that cold winter morning, its horns like serrated half-moons dying at its muscular jaw, the crackling ice echoing over the thrum of the boys' hearts. They had been told by the elders to bring back all their horses could carry, but the elders did not mean for the boys to hunt everything. Bighorn sheep were not for the taking. This, they were told as small lads, and the boys knew well the warning. They'd heard of men who'd killed sheep on the mountain, knew what those men's fates had been. And so the dilemma for the boys that morning was how to ask and answer the hunter's eternal question. Does one from an abundance breed scarcity? So upon this land of shiny mountains, each waited for the others, listening for the quickening breath of impatience or the steady sighs of acquiescence. And from the branches of the cedar, Victor searched below for Lyquand, who had been the first to mark the ram, the first to outstretch his solid arms and halt the party's movement, signaling for Victor to climb up between the cedar's limbs for a better look. Now Victor counted the heads below. There were only 5. The dark, squarish heads with sweeping hair so different from Victor's own were almost indistinguishable from one another. But Lyquand's head, now missing in the count, was different. His head cast a perfect oval. This Victor knew, for he had studied Lyquand since they were small boys, had watched him grow taller than Victor's reach, observed the muscles in his legs hardening though they'd run the same distances, jumped from the same boulders into the same rivers. As he sat upon the branch, Victor quieted himself, crushing all the wind's words into one long hum, listening for Lyquand's thick breaths, the sound of a near man among boys. He found the crag notes in the tree beside him where he made out Lyquand balanced on the edge of a limb, brushing hair from his eye before steadying his arrow. The boys below began moving about, the skins of their moccasins crunching inside day-old snow, causing the ram to start. Victor watched as Lyquand leapt from the tree, his bowed legs like a spider's carrying him over the white terrain, while the others looked on, their expressions filled with equal parts terror and awe as Lyquand took aim at the sheep, sized like a bear that now ran so fast and so hard into the distance it seemed it might run itself into the night sky. But then it was as if the ram had come upon a mighty boulder, for it stopped upon its cloven hooves inside a perfect circle of sunlight, with rays so comely and brilliant that they shone on the milky fleece of the ram's rump, as though gifting the forbidden to Lyquand. A few months earlier, alongside the mouth of the canyon, Victor sat with the same 6 boys to begin his first fast. Below them was the sky, painted sapphire blue, and a sea of red earth not yet covered in frost, but at the mercy of low, diaphanous clouds that lingered like protective mothers. The rock wall behind them, barbed and looming, protected the boys from an early winter's wind, and the rugged peak above them, known as Where They See the People, seemed to promise, as it had for generations of boys before, that their vision would soon appear. But several days passed, and while the other boys began to see their boxbay, Victor beheld nothing but bigger sky. He maintains his fast, sweated for additional days, prayed with an earnestness and fervor unmatched, and still Victor's vision did not come. And though this should not have been a source of dishonor, Victor could not be convinced that his humiliation was unfounded. Perhaps I had the vision but did not know. Father had laughed with disgrace in his throat, for the other men in the smoke lodge had looked upon them both with quick, sharp glances, reminding them, though it may not have been intended, that they were not Selekay by blood. Black-skinned, this was how Father described himself. Half black-skinned, half some unknown tribe, Edward Rose was a revered Selekay war chief who served also as a guide to foreigners. Men who thought themselves explorers, profiteers, compensated Father handsomely to push them beyond the expeditions of Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. And they did so because Edward Rose, though indeed black-skinned, had been with the clan most of his life and was nothing short of Upsalake. But Victor's mother's birthright could not be so easily explained. Rosa Rendon was of a different people, a people she tried once or twice to explain to Victor in clipped phrases. Long before he understood, he'd need to know of them for his story to be spoken. For Victor, Ma's history began when father brought her to live with the Upsalake after losing his 3 wives in a horse raid. As it was told, father's next intended had been chosen, a big-boned widow from a neighboring clan. But before their introductions, father set off for a year-long expedition, and to the dismay of the clan's women, returned home with a strange woman more black-skinned than he, who claimed she was born in the middle of the sea on a land she called Trinidad. So this story begins that way, and soon after that moment, something tragic happens on the camp. And Rosa, Victor's mother, rushes him away in the middle of the night. And all he knows is that they're going to meet a man. They're on a trail in the woods, and Victor is slowly starting to get impatient with his mother and all of her secrets. So I'll just read a little bit from that. That night, as Ma slept and Victor kept watch over Martinique, Ma's favorite mare, it felt like a circle of fire had pestled itself into Victor's chest. He thought of home, his sisters, all that he believed lost to him, and felt his thoughts like a rope, its strands swelling and tangled. Wake up, Victor. Ma was kneeling over him, shaking his shoulder. You mustn't cry in your sleep like so. She seemed sore, like she'd seen something she hadn't wished to see. Victor rubbed his eyes, startled, before realizing Ma was upset with him. And when, Ma? When can I feel what I'm feeling? Ma sat down, pulled her knees to her chest, and stared at Victor over the dying fire in a way she'd done only when she thought he did not notice. I need to get back home, he said. Your home is with me. What does that mean? The way Ma spoke was never plain, the words always masks. What do you think a mother does, Victor? What do you think I am? A mother, he said. Not a mother, your mother. Your mother who drips the world into your mouth like milk from a teat, making sure the host is healthy, making sure you don't get too much or too little. How does that host get fed, Victor? I bring her grain, I fatten her up. You want the whole world? When you see how big and ugly it is, you'll wish for me to break it into pieces and feed it so you don't choke on it. This is not Trinidad, he said to her. I'm not a little boy in knickers eating tea sandwiches or whatever it is you dream about that place no one has ever heard of. Ma doused the last of the embers with water and settled back onto her mat. You're a child, she said. A child? Then it'll be a child returning home in the morning, Victor said. In the days before his disagreement with Ma, they had alighted upon the Missouri River path. Its woodlands were thick with brambles and brush and fat rattlesnakes. They'd had to detour, for Shields River had bloated to impassable at each end, and mud had cascaded down the sides of the Elkhorns, trapping them to the east and to the west, until rain mercifully washed away some of the sludge. All this they had managed with aplomb, and yet it was upon Victor's return to his sleeping mat after relieving himself that he stumbled, like a little boy, onto a coiling, clawing branch that held on to his flesh, gripping it as though starved. Victor, Ma called out. He bit down on the pain and assured her all was well, but Victor couldn't return to sleep. And at daybreak, his leg from ankle to hip bulged with fever. He wrapped the wound and wished not to have Ma mother him, prideful and too embarrassed to need her. But his fever raged. Sickness has but one intention, he heard Ma mutter. A breeze blew and it sprinkled ice onto his cheeks as Ma propped her musket against the tree trunk. She scooped up his leg and set it under her armpit. The leg was plump and shiny. What are you doing? Victor thrashed and pushed Ma back into her musket, which tipped and slithered inside a brittle clump of leaves. Ma gripped his leg again as if it was a growing threat. She choked it with her clay pot and told it to quiet down. It was early the next morning, and still Ma suctioned Victor's leg, leaving a trail of bruised ovals atop the shiny. By dusk, the shiny dulled, and Victor's head regained its weight, and when he could think clearly again, Ma shoved a cut of sheepskin into his mouth and sliced open his thigh until the blood stood raised and stiff, like tomato seeds forced to applaud her. Ma lifted his head to the pouch filled with a bitter tea. Her eyes were shadowed, and she slouched like an empty, twisted sack before him. Drink up, she said. Is this your mama's tea? No, I don't have what I need for my mother's tea. Why don't you ever talk about her home? Because children use your words against you, like tea sandwiches and knickers. Victor grinned, but he knew he'd hurt her. The way you spoke to me, I would have never spoken to my mama like that, she said. I'm sorry. Victor watched her expression, trying to discern if she was open to another question, but could not be certain. Why did you leave home? He asked. Ma wiped the lip of the pouch with a worn hemp cloth and placed her hand across his forehead, flipping it over, hoping it seemed that at least one side of her hand would register the relief she desperately sought. I left because there could be no more dignity. And without dignity, living becomes unworthy of life. She avoided his eyes, placing the cloth back onto her waist, storing the pouch in the sack she would forget later to haul into the branches of a tree. The smoke from the fire still billowed as the sun broke through like a gorged udder. It was the fourth day of their delay. Victor had been awake for some time, watching Ma's lips move in her sleep as though she were in prayerful recitation. She woke panicked, smothered the ember chicks, checked him for fever. We may have to stay here one more night. They had left to eat only a small bit of wild rice, and Ma, who never wished to be without at least one day's supply of food, was growing concerned. That morning, Victor told her she could hunt, that he would be fine, and though Ma at first hesitated, she decided after surveying the area that it was best to leave while the world still felt quiet beneath them. Victor slept and dreamt, awakening on occasion to slap critters licking sweat from his collarbone. When Martinique first began to stir, Victor did not open his eyes, for he hardly noticed the mare's discomfort, but the old gal was persistent. And finally, when Victor sat upright, he saw that Martinique, who stood some distance from him, had pinned her ears and held her head cocked at some sound. I'm listening now, he whispered to her. Dead branches bit at the earth, their teeth clacked. Victor's bow and arrow lay in a sack upon Martinique. He wouldn't be able to reach them in time. Victor peered up into the grandfather fir overhead. Its branches were colossal spider's legs with sharp angles and plunging slopes. Climb it. He thought this as he pushed himself up from a ground, blooming cream-colored mushrooms. Martinique's ears twitched like parchment fans in the wind. Maybe Ma had changed her mind, he thought. Victor listened for the lilting rhythm of Ma's stride, upright on her toes, the walk of a farm girl who knew of the sea, but it was not Ma coming.
The suspense.
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry, Lauren. I didn't mean to have the screen shift back to me, but everyone is clapping. And if you take a look in the chat, there's some pretty awesome comments. So that was just beautiful.
Everyone, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh man. Well, that was an awesome way to kick off the evening. I am going to punt things over to Melissa for a few moments to introduce us to Furious Gravity.
Thank you, Lauren. That was amazing. It's the second time I got to hear you read at Politics and Prose, and it was just as beautiful. And I'm waiting for my copy. I can't wait. So what a treat. There are two things I did when I moved to DC 10 years ago. I met Richard Peabody, who introduced me to the Grace and Gravity series, and then I found out about the Inner Loop. And I immediately emailed Courtney and Rachel and said, hey, I'm new in town. Do you take writers like me who haven't published books at all and don't know anything about writing? And they opened their doors, of course. And it's been an amazing relationship that I'm super grateful for. So it's exciting to bring Furious Gravity to you. This is volume 9 in the series. It's the second volume I've edited, and Wendy Besselhan is our nonfiction editor, and we had so many amazing submissions from this community because we have so many great writers that it was difficult for us to choose 50. But we finally narrowed it down, and Furious Gravity has all 50 voices, and it's exciting tonight to bring you 8 of them. I keep saying this about all the stories. They're all my favorite stories, but these ones are really, really great. And also 4 of the writers tonight are debuting. This is their very first published piece. So it's a huge honor to have them in the book, but also to have the community support. So thank you, Rachel and Courtney, for everything you do for Interloop and for our community. And thanks, Lauren, for starting the night off with such a high bar. And so these are our 8 readers for tonight.
Awesome. So we are going to kick it off with BKONKOSKI.
I always forget I have to unmute myself. There we go. Okay. So thank you, Lauren. That was amazing. And thank you, Melissa, for including me. I am super excited to be a part of this. And so my sister, who is sort of the, what do I want to say, the model witch for this story, may be listening now. And so I drew a lot on some experiences in her world, just around her home and how she behaves as a witch. So it's called Witch, and I will stop at a moment of tension so that we sort of, hopefully some people will finish reading the story. Witched. My sister the witch took me in when I needed to hide from my husband, needed to heal and bandage myself back to health. After a 12-hour trip, I walked the 2 miles from the bus stop to her house just before dawn, and she handed me a mug of tea at the door. The hiding spell is ready, Aggie said, and asked no questions. For the first few weeks, she did most of the bandaging in the form of feeding me. Fresh asparagus with whole milk on cereal, frittatas from the eggs she gathered each morning, a thick vegetable soup served icy cold like gazpacho, but packed with rosemary and chopped garlic that slid down my throat like a milkshake of nutrients. For months, I had lived on pretzels and Diet Coke, now and then throwing a frozen dinner in the microwave and then picking at it, alone in the townhouse, while Steve worked late and went out to dinner almost every night with clients. She surrounded me with flavor and texture from her garden, making me swell like I was one of her pumpkins ripening in the dirt. Each night, she tucked me into bed after sprinkling my pillowcase with an oil for dreams. A lavender stillness filled my head as I breathed in the smell of campfires, fresh cilantro from the herb garden just outside, and the plush smell of trapped sunshine. Every window in the house was cleaned with newspaper and apple cider vinegar, so the morning sun came like arrows of light into all the dark corners. I woke each morning to dogs leaping down the stairs and Aggie in the kitchen already pouring us coffee. My normal nightmares ran from a house so full of seeds and joy and wind. My bruises faded and I stopped jumping at every banging door or raised voice. You have some weeding to do in the garden today, she told me a few weeks after my arrival. The tomatoes and peppers need extra hands so they're ready by the full moon. I smiled as I nodded, noticing how she spoke to me as she spoke to her teenage sons and husband. We were her labor, and I was happy to be healthy enough, by her standards, to join in. Both hands covered in dirt, I wiped sweat from my face with a shrug of my shoulder and felt streams rivulet down my body like I was a melting glacier. After the first few minutes of pulling weeds from the black earth, I learned to place the worms back carefully without shuddering too much, and eased the disturbed dirt back over the roots, patting it down as I worked. The rows looked endless as I switched from tomatoes to peppers and realized my nephews had already finished their assigned spaces. They ran past in swimsuits, headed for the lake on the edge of Aggie's property, as I worked the final row, jalapeno plants with blossoms already smelling of heat. Pretty passable, Aggie said, waiting where the dirt met green, a sweating glass of amber tea in her hand. Help me pick arugula and kale for our salad, and you're done for the day. Her busy, summer work household was exactly what I needed as cobblers and pickles came to life in her kitchen, and I began to think about how to move ahead. Produce of some kind sat on the counter every day, changing colors as the weeks went by. We chopped and froze green beans, then cut corn from the cob, and canned the peaches we gathered in her orchard. We ate it all too, but the miracles of those jars and packages, How sure she was of a family to feed through the winter, how safe in the promise of having those she loved around her when the cold season took hold, were the facts that most amazed me. This daily love affair with the ground on which she walked, her morning meditations and evening Wiccan prayers spoke to me of a hope I knew had never been in my life. By early October, the nights were too cool to sleep with the windows open, and I missed the sun's heat on my neck when I worked my morning garden hours. We dug the root vegetables for storage in stainless steel wash tubs, potatoes, carrots, and parsnips, just the two of us, bringing in the harvest with the boys back at school. They keep best in the dirt, and I love digging them out during a blizzard, like my garden keeps going. She finished speaking, then shifted onto her heels and stretched her back. I dumped 2 perfect potatoes into the wash tub on my right, their skins cool from the ground and covered in wet dirt. Could these 2 wind up in a stew I would eat? A breeze carried the smell of basil to my nose as Aggie stood and pinched some from the herbs that lined the rows and kept mosquitoes and asparagus beetles away, according to this sister of mine, who seemed to understand the connections between every living thing. It felt like an answer. I was staying here, my life now close to these rows. For as long as you like, Aggie said. She raised her hands above her head, then dropped into a sun salutation, one of her many spontaneous stretch and give thanks moves I had watched her use all summer. My husband Steve pulled into the driveway that afternoon while I was checking the pumpkin patch on the side of the barn closest to the house. At first, I thought he hadn't seen me, might not be certain he had found me, so I tucked myself behind the old apple tree as he climbed from his car, but the sun glinted off the gun in his hand as he slammed the door. Immediately, I stepped into view to steer him from the house. Probably stop there.
Awesome. I love this mystical story about all the things in my everyday life, like vegetables and herbs and heat, although it's been nice and cool lately. Okay, so next we have Anna Cajo. I hope that I've pronounced that correctly.
Hi, it's Cajo. I'm so excited to read this to you all today. It's a great Washington story about a great Washingtonian. Here we go. It's atmospherics, baby. Tiger Fork opened up in the old Rogue 24 space. I wanted to tell you about it. They painted dragon murals on the exposed brick walls. The sign above the door is 2 red, neon, humming Chinese characters. I assume they spell Tiger Fork. They have a cocktail menu with drinks like 8 o'clock light show with rum as a base. Other ingredients like ginseng and astragalus pay homage to Chinese medicine. The claim is the drink will help cure you of your fatigue. You and I have always believed in the therapeutic benefits of a good cocktail. For New Year's, they hung paper lanterns from the rooftops in the alley. The food is great. You would love the crispy fish with the head still on and the eye staring right back at you. What I really think you'd love is the atmosphere. A cool playlist, a handsome waitstaff, and gorgeous warm light dancing around the room. The biggest change is a new giant hexagonal window, which you would immediately recognize as a total steal from the old Yenching Palace in Cleveland Park. I can hear you say in your Jack Nicholson voice, it's atmospherics, baby. Which reminds me, Candida, your former therapist, of course you would have a former therapist named after flora and infection, who was also the niece of Dom DeLuise, gave me an article about Einstein's quote, energy cannot be created or destroyed, they can only be changed from one form to another. Candida pointed out that even when we die, the energy we are is changed, but not destroyed, that we still exist in the atmosphere. The energy we are is changed, but not destroyed. So you don't have to believe in God to believe in an afterlife. It's atmospherics, baby. I worry about some of the other spaces in the alley, like Whiskey Village. It sprung out of the empty lot across from the back of Longview Gallery. I think it could end up bringing that college-age drinking crowd. I mean, with a name like Whiskey Village. Maybe it won't open, seeing as the building has been empty for months now. Not sure what is happening in the old boxing gym. Feels like every structure is going to have a restaurant in it. Some will make it and others won't, like Table on 9th Street. We both enjoyed it, and you called that one. It's now shuttered. Here's some crazy news. Me and the captain have been hanging out with Old Lady Khan, and we love him. First of all, I can't believe that's your moniker for him. Shame on you. But then again, you call me starstruck little fag hag, and somehow, falling from your lips, and yours only, it feels sweet. I'm endeared to be boiled down to a caricature version of myself. Anyhow, Daniel Kahn and I are thinking about seeing James Taylor in concert. I don't even like James Taylor that much, but I wanted to go with Daniel because, like you, he has a way of making me feel special, like I'm on the verge of doing something, experiencing something phenomenal. And you were so right about his apartment. It's an incredible renovation. I thought it would be overly modern or sterile, but it's beautifully furnished, from the Serge Mille chandelier to the floor-to-ceiling bookcase on the upper level. Of course, I insisted that he demonstrate the dumbwaiter that carries his French press coffee to his tiny bird's nest rooftop garden. How and why were you keeping him from me? He takes an Uber to his office in Tyson's Corner every day. He and I are natural friends, despite the fact that he is a smart economist who loves modern decor, while I can barely add, and I love dusty old things. In January, he held a dinner at his place. He invited Nadia, Jake, Todd. Philip couldn't make it. I think he had the flu. And the cute couple you refer to as the Republican operatives. Her name is Megan. And by the way, she's not a Republican. And his name is also Todd, I think. Wacky and wonderful Matilda, your next door neighbor, she fell asleep at the table. Also Katie, her son Asher, and Jennifer, who now has Harper the pit bull, who lives with 2 cats and a snake. Picture that, a pit bull with 2 cats and a snake. Daniel had the table set with a beautiful embroidered tablecloth that was his mother's. The lights were up. Will people ever learn to turn down the lights? I mean, who doesn't look better or feel sexier with the lights down low? It's dining, it's not surgery. I hear those words coming out of your mouth. I always felt smart and sexy at your dinner parties, surrounded by your books, watching you manually change CDs from Grace Jones to Dolly Parton to Rosemary Clooney. We laughed and delighted in each other's stories as you cooked and served meals that went deep past midnight. Your guests, surrounded by candlelight and what seemed like 20 tiny lamps tucked in the bookcase you decoupaged with obits from the 1980s, theater tickets, cartoons from the New Yorker, and wine labels. I will never forget when Albert Randolph, Washington's premier fetishist, told me that you didn't just decorate, you taught people how to live. Those giant, starched, straight from Besson's dry cleaner dinner napkins from someone's mother's European grand tour. You could have served us dirt and it would have tasted of caviar. It's atmospherics, baby. Si, chica, si. Yes, girl, yes, I learned it from you, and I would stake my life on it. Okay, this is the best story, and only you could have found a better punchline. Nadia, who was pregnant, not sure if you knew that, had a baby in her car. As in, went into labor and birthed a baby in her car. Yes, she did. Jake was driving. They told the story at Daniel Kahn's embroidered tablecloth dinner, and we were all dying. It was so funny. It was almost as funny as the story you told us of how Jim Neighbors offered to give you a bath in a hotel in Vegas in the 1970s. Or the one you told me about losing your virginity to a hooker in Elko, Nevada when you were like 13, and how ultimately you bought Barbra Streisand's first album off the same hooker a week later. My favorite is when you had an office at 9th and F Streets Northwest, and how the hairdresser on the floor below you had a sign outside her window that read, Pat, your hairdresser. And you wanted to hang one outside of your window that read, Fuck your decorator. Turns out Nadia was yelling at Jake to drive faster. It's coming right now. Then Jake piped in with that honey-toned voice. We're almost there. They were headed to GW Hospital, and right there on Virginia Avenue, Nadia said, I feel a head in my underwear. How many people ever utter that string of words? The baby fell to the floor mat. Thankfully, we just had the car detailed, Nadia said. Jake scooped up the baby, and she gasped for air and let out a small cry. She is fine and named Vivian Virginia. Here, Jerry, is where I want to sum it all up. Say something poignant about how resilient life is. I wanted to tell you, Jerry, thanks for teaching me about lighting and love and laughter. It's not lost on me, the poetry, the irony. On January 23rd, 2016, days before your 69th birthday, you took your own life during the blizzard. The requisite drugs and booze, a turkey brining plastic bag, duct tape, and a tank of helium. Laughing gas. You killed yourself with laughing gas. I wanted you to know that this year we celebrated your 70th at Daniel Kahn's apartment, above your old apartment, where everything was perfect, except for the lighting. And you weren't there, or were you?
Thank you, Anna. And I don't know if everyone saw, but that was her first public reading ever. So what a piece to choose. It's pretty awesome. We are going to move next to, and I'm sorry, I'm bad at pronunciation, Dan Gao. Is that close? Maybe.
Hi, everyone. You can hear me. So I'm Diane Guo, and I want to say it's so cool to read after Anna because I'm actually kind of obsessed with you, not in a weird way. I've been to your store. I bought a mirror from you like 2 years ago. And when I saw the list of people who were published, I had this vision that we would be at a party together and I would ingratiate myself with you and you would invite me to your house, which I've seen featured in the publications in the area, and it looks so cool. I'm looking at it now. Anyway, so my essay, The China Expert, is about my young childhood in 1980s Southwest China. And I thought I would read an excerpt from the middle section about the golden age of Chinese television, which I think has not been, explored sufficiently in contemporary literature. So, shortly after my mom left for America, my family in Duying moved to a new apartment on the top floor of a 5-story building with green floor tiles. By this time, the rooster was gone, and we acquired 3 cats. Occasionally, one of our cats would fall off the balcony. That is, one of them would disappear from the apartment and would be discovered sometime later in the courtyard. They never died, but would limp around for a few weeks. My uncle explained to me that cats always land on their feet. Though if cats have such superior balance, why would they fall off in the first place? An important form of entertainment for me in those early years was to get up on a stool and look down over the balcony ledge for a while. We had a black and white TV, but the programming was not compelling. I do remember a random Bollywood movie on repeat in which a man declared, "I like to change women the way I change my shirts." Up on the balcony, I would look down at the street, counting the people and the cyclists who came and went along the gravel road. I looked at the sky, I looked down again. I wondered if I jumped down 5 stories, would I land on my feet like a cat? Such innocent musings would soon come to an end. The golden age of Chinese television dawned when I was 5 years old. Two shows would dominate the television and my consciousness for the next few years. The Journey West, despite its dry title and being based on a classical text, was made for kids. A magical monkey, a virginal monk, and a horny pig need to travel across China on an important quest. Along the way, they meet and fight many random foes. A lot of demons want to eat the monk because consuming his flesh will make them immortal. And some women want to seduce the monk because women always desire what they can't have. The horny pig casually commits sexual harassment wherever he goes, but he's so dumb and lovable, it's okay, just as most things were okay in the 1980s, especially in China. The central relationship is between the monkey and the monk, his master, who counsels the monkey to be more trusting and patient. The problem is that the monkey is always right. The recurring plot of each episode involves the group meeting an innocent-looking human being on their journey, like an old woman, or a young girl picking berries in the woods, or a crying child. The monkey attacking this person, and the monk master getting mad at the monkey and stalking off in a huff somewhere by himself, like a whiny girlfriend. Then the monk is captured by the demon in disguise, who either wants to eat him or make sweet love to him, sometimes both in the reverse order. The monkey has to show up in the nick of time to rescue the monk, twirling his golden staff and displaying his whirlwind kicks and leaps. The Communist Party fully understands that popular entertainment is a powerful vehicle for imparting values and morality upon the masses. And here is what I learned as a 5-year-old from The Journey West. Number 1, don't trust anyone. Number 2, sex exists and monks are extra sexy. The second major television show of this era was The Dream of the Red Chamber, which was slower with less fighting, no demons or talking animals, but it was literally the only other television show and had pretty ladies in flowing costumes, so I consumed it with the same fervor. Screen time was not monitored and highly encouraged. The main character is a young orphan named Lin Daiyu. She often coughs delicately into a silk handkerchief and is sent to live with her wealthy relatives in the city. I like to daydream that I was a beautiful, sickly orphan on the verge of a tragic death, just like her. Bao Yu, her cousin, is the heir of the wealthy family and a flirtatious nincompoop of a male lead. No, they don't end up together. Yes, she dies, but it takes a really long time. Many episodes involve courts and political intrigue. I didn't grasp the mechanics of the schemes, but over time, I absorbed the essential truths these meandering plots were meant to convey. Number 1, men are idiots. Number 2, women are terrible, mainly to each other. Before I ever stepped into a classroom, I felt my education was complete. Stop there.
Hooray. Sorry, navigating several things. That was awesome. Thank you so much, Diane. Okay, so next we have Shaileen Backman.
Hello. This piece is called Old Girl's Tap. I lean over in my chair to buckle the straps of my black tap shoes. They feel a little tight and unfamiliar. It has been 2 years since I was here last, and I am ambivalent about returning. I can almost recall those dance recitals back when I was 7, 8, and 9, but I am so much more than 9. I rise and walk, clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack to the bar. The woman in the mirror winces disapprovingly. The community center is warm, oak floorboards warped and rutted. The radiators clank and hiss, and huge, heavy windows above them are propped open with assorted handles and sticks to let the steam out into the playground where preschoolers in unzipped coats squeal and wrestle for turns on the swings. The warm-up begins. The instructor begins to review the fundamentals. Okay, I assure myself, nothing new here. You're just a little rusty. We start with rolling our ankles in wide, fluid circles to stretch our muscles. The over 40-ish salt and pepper-haired woman to the far right is a newcomer. She is so new that she does not have any tap shoes. I wonder how that it can't be very much fun in crepe-soled Rockports. For me, the best part is the sound of the tap. Oh well, I shrug. She'll either have tap shoes by next week or quit. We continue with 8 shuffles, 8 toe heels, 8 flaps. First to the front, then to the side, then to the back. My legs feel heavy and sluggish. The music beats a steady rhythm, and we shuffle, flap, and tap in unison, all except the new woman, who is swooshing and squeaking. On her direct left is the class show-off, whose voice is loud and hoarse. She is exceedingly peppy. She was in this class 2 years ago, and I remember her all too well. Our instructor singles the 2 of us out. You and you, she points. Do 8 maxi forwards and 8 pullbacks. I reach into the dusty cobwebs of my brain and find nothing. I give a weak smile. She nods courteously. She offers a quick demonstration. My recall and my feet do not completely cooperate. My partner is hammering out her steps so fast that I can't even think. She is beginning to give me a headache. I make a few spastic attempts, and then I look up. She is staring, waiting for me to finish. She has entirely too much foundation on. I would like to take a butter knife and scrape it off. Instead, I smile and say, "So, how have you been?" The other 3 women are just now finishing an easier version, and I am wishing I had been placed in that subgroup. We move to the center of the room. Our agile teacher expertly performs a happy little piece. She smiles and directs, "Now you try." I am not yet convinced I should have returned. She breaks it down and we repeat it step by step. Then she says, "Try closing your eyes and just listening to it this time." I catch the beat and am encouraged. I peer down the line and catch a glimpse of the woman in the crepe-soled shoes lifting her gray t-shirt to mop her sweaty brow, exposing a pale and flabby stomach. I smile, I wave, I give her a thumbs up, and I offer, "You're doing great." She nods appreciatively. The room is getting warm, and we break for water. The floorboards creak as we tromp down to the fountain. Preschoolers rush to peek out their classroom doors to catch a glimpse of this stampede. What must they think? I wonder how old we must look to them. I am reminded of a conversation I had with my daughter on the way home from a family reunion. She wanted to know the name of the old girl with the gray hair. I immediately started naming everyone in the room over 70, but she stopped me and repeated emphatically, "No, that old girl who gave me the book." She was referring to our cousin who had just turned 50. I snickered, then howled, and then gasped at its implications. It was, from her perspective, an appropriate description. At the fountain, we take our cool drink and file back in, clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. Our teacher announces the closing dance, a variation on river dance. I sigh because I remember this one as strenuous. I am not sure I have the stamina. The music begins, a little bit fast but manageable. Flap ball change, hop, flap, heel, chug. The pace quickens. We are going round and round in a big circle. My partner is in front of me, but she is too slow, and I am about to knee her in the butt. I've got it now. It's an Irish tempo, fervent and driving. We're going faster and faster. A few fall out of the circle, but I persist. Our instructor is smiling approvingly. I am exhilarated. I am unstoppable. The music peaks in a grand crescendo and ceases. I throw my head back laughing. We are sweating. We are panting. We are done. We return to the chairs to unbuckle our shoes, chatting happily. The women look kinder to me now. Equanimity unfolds across our panting, sweating troop. I guess I'll come back next week. I can still do this, for I am not so very old. I wouldn't classify myself as an old lady yet, just an old girl.
Yay.
That was great. I actually had visions of going back to dance class right before quarantine hit, and I don't know now.
Silly.
So I think we're going to pause for a few moments. We'll take a 10-minute intermission. And as we mentioned, we'll break everyone up into breakout rooms, but feel free to chat for a little or else go get yourself a drink, take a break, whatever feels right. It's exactly in a few seconds. It's 8 o'clock, so we'll meet back here at 8:10 and we'll have 4 more readers. Beautiful. We are going to get started back up here with JJ Kent.
Hi, sorry, I just fell on my chair. I don't know how that's possible, but I managed to do it. Thank you so much for having me, and I think I'll just start. My story is called The January Migration. I hadn't decided I was going to fight with Andrew until my glass of wine had been refilled. We were in the East Village at a small sushi spot that we frequented. It was a popular local spot just south of my apartment, the sort of place that was constantly abuzz, but always had a couple free stools at the bar. Under the hum of dinnertime conversation, the radio played classic rock, occasionally interrupting itself with a deep metallic voice that obnoxiously proclaimed, New York's Q 104.3 between songs. It was a particularly cold winter evening, but the restaurant was lively. People ate around us with pink thong noses and coats elegantly draped over frozen shoulders, navigating by waiters that darted in and out of the kitchen with hot sake and colorful arrays of sashimi. Outside, the remaining snow was brought to life with the kicking of feet and the spraying of cars. Thank you, I said enthusiastically, smiling up at our waiter with Cabernet-tinged teeth as he filled my empty wine glass. The waiter, however, did not notice. He was too busy surveying the room for raised hands and dishes to bust to notice my eager grin. With a dramatic flair, I turned my attention back to my date with a ruffling of feathers, spitefully pouting and crossing my arms. Like the waiter, though, Andrew was either uninspired by my theatrics or completely oblivious to them. He sat across from me, blissfully chattering away about his day between bites of spicy tuna rolls. I studied him and sipped my wine, anger unthawing in me as the alcohol flushed my numb cheeks. Jess, it's just crazy how, he said, surfacing momentarily from his tangent to make eye contact with me. At this point, he was too deep into his speech to notice my irritation, and he dove back into the depths of whatever he was saying in some dramatic wave of his chopsticks. Then, our feelings were flammable. We combusted into a fire of mid-20s aggravation at the slightest friction. Andrew found his arguments in grandiose issues: trust, respect, communication, the future. He constructed a fight like Dr. Phil on steroids. The multiple occasions I didn't refill toilet paper rolls were indicators that I didn't respect his physical needs. The times I watched the finale of The Sopranos without him meant I didn't value his company. And the occasions in bed that he snored and I punched him awake signified our lack of compatibility. I, on the other hand, looked at relationships from the bottom up, the vantage point of the details. He didn't see an issue with the nickname Cutie. He loudly hummed anytime we walked anywhere. He couldn't seem to keep a houseplant alive. And he had at least 3 shirts that I hated. God was in the details, and together, these details said something about why we would never work out. From either standpoint, our fights took on a spiral pattern that built into a dramatic crescendo of dueling rage. The spark this particular evening was Andrew's rambling. He had started a story about work when we sat down and had delivered an unrelenting monologue since. I can't even remember asking him about how his day was. It was like he'd he'd experienced a neurological break that confused our relationship with a therapy session where his role was to vomit thoughts and mine was to listen intently and play with my wire frame glasses. My day, my opinions, even my presence were all unimportant. At this rate, Andrew probably would have been better off dating a blow-up doll, and I'd be happy for the two of them. He would finally have someone that would sit through his soliloquies without making bitchy faces, and she'd be happy to sit through them. Compared to the lives of other blow-up dolls, a dinner date with a chatty man was certainly quite a treat anyhow. Figuring it was a good place to get involved and hoping the question would clue Andrew into involving me in the conversation, I interjected, "You don't say," with overly feigned fascination. Was this the future I wanted? A dating accessory for weaving yeses and oh reallys into one-track soliloquies? I thought about giving birth to his child, sweating in the delivery room as he sat next to me babbling about his high school soccer career or where he had acquired his affinity for salty food. Family dinners where I stood watching from the kitchen, where everyone talked and no one listened, hardly stopping to appreciate the food prepared for them. A retirement home where I wished to die just to escape hearing one more minute of the argument for how Star Wars changed movies forever. The restaurant we were eating at must have been the few that was open on the block that was open late, since girls without tights on in heels kept coming in and asking about the cocktail menu, or to stand in the entryway and unfreeze their texting fingers. Its front door, like most others in the city, had been covered in a two-part winter vestibule that ensured the space didn't turn into a polar vortex every time it opened. Even with the vestibule, the entry of each new person hit me with a small gust of frozen January air. I flinched at a blast of winter air that accompanied a duo of close to frozen NYU students who burst in to inquire about tequila shots. For the dozenth time, the waiter shook his head. Sake, Sapporo, house wine only. Andrew, meanwhile, was still talking about his project, oblivious to my shivering. He'd invested in this plot line with the attention to detail of a medical textbook. I uncrossed and recrossed my arms. Andrew, I finally snapped, irritation poorly imitating innocence. Are you going to ask me a single question tonight, or are you just going to assume I'm on vocal rest? Andrew blinked, emerging from his soliloquy. The merriment in his expression vanished. He exhaled, reaching for his Sapporo as he bewilderedly noticed my crossed arms and squinted glare for the first time. Just what? He replied in agitation, reading the frustration in my face and meeting me with his own. I'm just trying to tell you about my day, which you should want to hear about. Are you even paying attention anyways? Andrew's tone was always the first thing to go. Just moments before, his voice had been sing-songy and melodious, but my snark instantly soured his mood. I sipped my shitty Cabernet and scowled back at him, secretly pleased at the fresh anger that appeared across his brow. This was my opportunity to backtrack. I'm sorry, baby, I could have apologized, rubbing his arm and softening my face. That was rude. I just had a long day, and I checked out for a minute. Please continue. I took a breath. Well, Andrew, I finally replied, pausing for a second to build the dramatic effect of my words. It's tough to pay attention when you've been talking at me for 45 minutes straight. The backtrack was not in me tonight. We paid the check in silence, pretending to study other people around us while deliberately avoiding eye contact. We broke the silence only to thank our waiter obsequiously, We transferred our anger with each other onto him in an oddly complimentary tornado. Thank you so much. You have such great hair. Best meal I've ever had. Wow, I love your glasses. We marched out of the restaurant together, both anticipating the imminent brawl, as we saccharine thanked each waitstaff member on the way out, wishing them good evenings as we headed on into our bad one. Out of the vestibule, and finally back on the snow-covered street, we exhaled our stifled anger, exploding against each other, into and with one another. Andrew was my anger and I was his. We fought in lockstep, talk yelling, our gnarled faces illuminated occasionally under street lamps and by headlights of passing cars. We struggled to fling insults at each other over the loud crunch of freshly salted sidewalks and the slush of taxis. What kind of fucking idiot are you? What were you thinking? Oh, you just decided to be fucking crazy tonight? That's it? Not a single person in New York gave our walking street show much attention. It was one of the things I love most about the city. I could scream at the top of my lungs, and not a nervous squirrel would turn its head. We stomped by other little universes like ours, a group of investment analysts out to drinks, awkwardly postured first dates consumed with thoughts of that goodnight kiss, throngs of fast-walking, late-night yoga attendees, not one of them interested in whether Andrew cared about my feelings or I had rolled my eyes at him. They had their own melodramas to worry about. Minds otherwise occupied with rage. Andrew and I did not notice that our feet had betrayed us. The knifing of tongues was undecipherable in our lower halves, which we blindly moved in harmony. 4 brisk legs striding together in militant coordination. We must have looked like a bickering pair of Canadian geese, our boisterous honking mocked by the apparent synchronicity. Right, left, I can't fucking believe! Right, left, selfish ass. Pausing for a red light, the crunch of our steps fell silent, and so did we. It felt wrong to argue without the rhythmic clomp of walking beneath the chorus of insults. We each stood facing straight ahead, stiff-armed with bald hands in coat pockets, still too proud to make eye contact. We studied each other through our peripheries. From any other perspective, we were a coincidence, 2 angry-looking strangers standing at the same street corner. It wasn't until we began moving again, plodding ahead under the glow of the green signal, that our familiarity became apparent. Right, left, forward together into the cold. By the time we were a block from the apartment, First Avenue had become a wind tunnel. The city whipped snow and salt through the dark into our faces. The wind burned the back of my head, and I clenched my eyes shut, relying on my sense of direction to get me home. Blinded, I could still feel Andrew trudging beside me against the forceful blusters, a lone partner in the urban time. In this weather, he normally would offer his hat or a warm hand to hold, but not this evening. I could freeze for all he cares, I thought. Teeth chattering, I imagined the newspaper headline, "Selfish boyfriend indicted in the death of girlfriend." That would show him. Obdurately, I shoved my hands deeper into my jacket pockets as the entrance of my building came within view. I should have known this bullshit was never going to work out anyways, I spat. I guess fucking so, Andrew spat back in congruence, barely audible over the wind. And together, we walked up the entryway stairs, our bodies brightened out of the dark by the lights of the lobby, a lone pair of curious geese migrating home. Thank you.
So funny and intricate and beautiful. Thank you. Okay, next, Pamela Huber.
Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me okay? Great. Always nervous with AirPods. This is the Jubilee. The kids appear from the darkness with nets in hand for the Jubilee. They form a line of pale bodies spread 100 yards wide. The new moon casts no light. The kids unpocket their flashlights and flick thin beams across the beach. Thousands of angry claws strike the air in retreat. Russian! Jimmy shouts as he charges across the sand, swinging his net in wide, whooshing arcs. He nears the first line of crabs and tries to halt, but his momentum overcarries him. His battle cry turns on itself as claws snap at his ankles and clamp skin. The other kids let out whoops of laughter and rush after him. They are careful not to overrun the crabs. They make big scoops with their nets into the dark sea of gleaming pincers. Kids with oven mitts for hands stuff the crabs into pillowcases. Lolly crouches off to the side where the water meets the sand and lets her toes wiggle in, as she watches the gaggle before her. Evade the crabs, evade the sea, nothing but sand for little Lolly, her mother would sing to her. Lolly does as she's told. She stays clear of the crab's Jubilee. Mother never said not to watch. The Jubilee is in a panic. Some crabs scuttle back toward the sea. The kids know the crabs won't stay in the water for long. The oxygen levels are too low for them to breathe. The crabs that didn't retreat flee their would-be catchers by climbing further up the sandy slope, eager to stay in the heaty, rich air. They are greedy for life. The kids are greedy for a feast. Shells are crushed underfoot. Eleanor, in her flip-flop loses the tip of her pinky toe. Her scream blends in with all the other shouts of excitement and pain and rivalry. Lolly's eyes are on the crab when they should be on the sea. To the kids, the joy of a sudden jubilee is everything. No world exists outside of it. It does not occur to them that their screaming will wake Mr. Sanders, who lives just past the dunes. He rises from bed, throws his robe on, and takes to the beach, prepared to chew them out. But oh, what a familiar sight from his own heart. He thinks of his childhood, of his first jubilee. The waterman talked of a nearby power plant, bacteria decomposing, deoxygenation. But all he and his friends had heard was that thousands of blue crabs were coming ashore, searching for air. He smiles at the memories that the chaotic beach scene stirs. Children laughing, conquering the night and the sea, taking the plunder of their bravery. It is not condemnable. It is commendable. He does not scold or scream. Mr. Sanders is the first to realize what has happened to Lolly. She has no time to brace herself for the staggering weight of the wave. It surges ahead of the sea and strikes her with brunt anger. It drags her heels from their graves in the sand back into the dark water. Frothy foam cloys her throat and forces her to cough, which draws in more seawater. Salt burns Lolly's lungs, yet still instinct tells her to cough it out, breathing more in. Before Mr. Sanders sends out the shout, before the kids turn their flashlights toward the receding waves, before Sanders plunges into the water and starts his frantic diving, Lolly feels a surge of panic. Hauled backward, there's a shudder of desperation, kicking darkness. She opens her eyes to the sting of the salt and tries to swim up, but cannot find up, searches for a moon above the water only to remember there is no moon, just crushing, tumbling black. Through the black, she sees flashlight beams flicker like stars in the sky across the roof of the ocean. In the undertow, the oxygen is leaving her blood, devoured by her kicking muscles. Carbon dioxide increases, turns her blood to acid. She holds her breath. Her throat burns. Acid builds in the blood, but it takes time, and as instinct beats her inefficient arms and legs toward what looks like the surface, she feels the whole sum of her short life. It's not added up by years lived, or dogs petted, or marbles lost, or baby teeth tucked under pillows. It's not the sum of trips to the zoo or snowfalls. She doesn't remember a single falling star or a single wish she made. She does not think of her favorite teacher, or her father, or her mother. Acid builds in the blood and the tumbling is softer now. The panic dissipates. A moment of calm peace. She must breathe. The taste of the salt water reminds her of soup. After the first few swallows, she thinks she can drown the whole ocean inside of her. Her brain's losing oxygen, and she's adding all the crabs that have gone uncaught and multiplying them by all their babies and grandbabies and great-grandbabies, enjoying their festive, raucous jubilee. She's adding, and she's remembering the first time she ever saw a crab, a tiny, translucent sand crab. She and her brother had dug deep holes as long as their forearms along the beach, looking for the sand crabs. And how they laughed with joy as gentle waves rushed up between their knees, and the holes flooded with water and uprooted the small crabs from just below the surface. How they swam down, puckered their way back into the sand, nothing but air bubbles left in their wake. The water's in her lungs, and she remembers lifting scoops of sand from the ground and letting the ocean wash away each grain through her chubby fingers to reveal the exposed crabs, timid as mice, pincers the size of splinters. The oxygen's leaving her blood, and her arms stop rising to part the sky, and she imagines that she is a crab tunneling down into the sand to sleep. Jimmy, she laughs, look, it's a whole family, a mama and a daddy and their babies. The tiny crabs burrow into the seams between her fingers in search of refuge. Send them back to the sea, Lolly. Send them back home.
Oh man, so I grew up down the shore, and that just evoked so many things for me. Thank you, Pam. Next up, we have S.L. Staley.
Hi, I'll be reading Sting today. Act 1. Sylvester laid on the hoard again. "Let's get a move on it, buddy," he shouted out the cracked window of his new Mercedes. The steering wheel felt warm under his hands, the result of sitting in a parking lot all day. He removed one hand from the wheel to adjust his Hermes tie, which was now dangerously tight around his throat. Despite the maze of cars clogging the Memorial Bridge, today was an otherwise lovely day, the 2nd of April. Sylvester lowered the sun visor as he held his foot on the brake. He caught a glimpse of his slicked back hair in the visor's open mirror. 80s rock screeched from his new speakers. Meanwhile, in the next car over, Rebecca reached out her hand to turn on her radio. She began singing along while looking at the tail end of the Lincoln Memorial. Tourists migrated in flocks this time of year. If not for the gorgeous pink cherry blossoms, this fact would have annoyed her. Besides, the way she saw it, she could be singing in her shower or behind the steering wheel. At least this had a better view. Finally, traffic began to flow across the bridge. Rebecca's hands steered with muscle memory. She had traveled this route too many times to count. Suddenly, a bee buzzed through her open window and landed on her dashboard. She followed the flow of traffic to the roundabout as the car before her began crawling forward. Rebecca tried not to panic while opening the glove box to retrieve her EpiPen. A river of crinkled napkins and salt packets poured to the ground, leaving her EpiPen to fall to the floor. Damn it! She steadied her foot on the gas as she reached her right arm down to grab the pen, keeping her eyes glued to the lurking bee. Sylvester unlocked his phone when he reached the end of the bridge. He opened his email, which had 1,073 unread messages. Ugh, I just cleared my inbox yesterday. The right side mirror of his black Mercedes plowed into the driver's side of Rebecca's car, blocking the bridge's entrance. A chorus of horns honked as Sylvester threw open his door, phone still in hand. "You're a dead man," he hollered as he grabbed his weapon of choice from the backseat of his car, a crowbar. As Sylvester stormed his way to Rebecca's car, he continued to shout, "What the hell are you doing? Do you have a driver's license? On my brand new car, too. Learn how to drive, buddy." Amidst the chaos, the bee, as they do, stung Rebecca on the forearm. She grasped for air more fervently as her airways tightened. The last thing she ever saw was Sylvester's face, tomato red, screaming at her, though she could not hear him. She fixated on the pulsating vein in his forehead. Sylvester's face softened as he lowered his crowbar and dialed 911. "If you die, I can't sue you. Stay with me," he yelled at Rebecca. So fixated on his quest to save his mortal foe, he didn't notice the semi barreling towards him. 18 wheels of brakes screeched on the blacktop. Act 2. Soul number C19's vision flooded with bright light. They blinked until they regained their sight. C19 found themselves sitting on an old picnic bench underneath a sheer canopy. The sun's rays snuck through the thin fabric. "Hello?" they queried, uncomfortable at their forced solitude. C19 stood up, enjoying the familiarity of grass beneath their feet. Off in the distance, past a white picket fence, was a beach with soft pink sand. No one was there. Suddenly, a bright figure, not quite a woman, appeared, sitting at the table underneath the tent. C19 could not explain how, but felt a sense of calm from the figure. They sat down once again to join the radiating being. "So, you performed better as Rebecca, much better than your attempt as Sylvester, but we're gonna have to send you back," the figure explained while holding their hands together. "We're thinking, based on your achievements and setbacks, that perhaps sometime in the 15th century would be best. You spent over 10,000 hours on unproductive technology the last 10 years of your life. A goal he set for you in this next life is to establish more discipline and self-control. Not that you'll remember any of this, but your heart might. C19's fatal flaw is that they lacked foresight, thus the reason they ended up right back here every incarnation they lived." "Who is he and where the hell am I?" C19 yelled at the figure. "For that matter, who are you?" "What do you mean, send me?" C19 fumed as they stood. They slammed their hands on the table as if to demand an answer. "There's that classic anger of yours. How's that worked in your pursuit to control, Look, we don't have a lot of time. Let me catch you up. I'm gonna show you something overwhelming. I need you to trust me. We've had this conversation 37 times. It's getting a bit tedious, so I'm gonna show you this time. I need you to trust me and not panic." The figure's light surrounded C19 before they had the opportunity to protest. Flashbacks of past incarnations flooded into C19's vision like vignettes on a screen. How had they forgotten? A gush of wind swept across C-19's face while they rode a horse, navigating through a dense wooded forest. In one moment, their hands were on leather reins. The next, they were chained to a wooden platform. In front of them, a mob of screaming villagers chanting, "Hang the witch!" After a sudden drop, a view of the clouds high above the earth came into picture from the inside of a cockpit. One hand on the control wheel, another on the trigger. Bombs exploding in the distance. Blink. Then a phone and a crowbar appeared in C-19's hands. A semi came rushing towards them from the roundabout until there was nothing but darkness. And I think that's a good place to stop. Thank you for having me.
That was awesome. That took such a crazy turn, and I was on board for all of it. Okay, next, Kaida Castrucci.
Kaida Castrucci.
Kaida Castrucci. Welcome.
Thank you. So the story is called The Visits. I have become better at anticipating her arrival in a gray cloud, powerful and sneaky, attractive in a very dangerous way. She never knocks on the door. I just see her sitting, legs crossed, comfortable on the couch. The bitch is here, I say to myself, resigned and weary. When she visited, I was doomed. Melancholy, I used to call her when I did not know what it was. That meant that when she came, I was more creative, locking myself in a corner, writing poetry, and tearing up a little. Fall was my season because it was the natural habitat for melancholy, the leaves turning yellow, brown, and red, and then covering everything. The cloudy sky, the thunder, and the rain all fed into making her an irresistible creature. Melancholy would not allow me the luxury of a childhood. I was always a grown-up. It did not even occur to me that this was a deprivation. I secretly took pride in my depth of thought, although now it is clear that it was actually something quite different. I did not tell anyone about the frequent visitor. I did not want to, but even if I had, I did not have the words for her. In my not yet formed worldview, a feeling could not be explained. She could be expressed in a literary form through extrapolation. She was and still is bossy. I'm tired of all this noise around, so let's go right now. I need to be in your room, only with you, and don't feel like socializing with these stupid kids, she would say. Okay, sure, I'm not enjoying myself anyway, I would reply. So we would drag our feet, hide in loneliness, and spend the rest of her visit together. She was and still is manipulative. She drains my energy with her presence, but she releases her grip when she feels I'm about to suffocate. This means that she allows me enough strength to keep going without collapsing. During my teenage years, her visits were tangled in my insecurities, and her presence was laced with my guilt. My poems became dark, my outlook was bleak. I was no longer certain whether she was an uninvited guest or if I had summoned her to commiserate. I could not confide in anyone, so at times she remained my only friend. In those periods, she kept murmuring in my ear the whole time, telling me how nasty the weather was, how my boyfriend did not love me, how my friends talked behind my back, how I should not trust anyone because they were either malicious, jealous, predator, or evil. And because bad luck or unfortunate circumstances confirmed some of the most terrible things she said, I believed her about the things that were never confirmed as well. I was no longer able to distinguish between the time when she would sprawl across any room I happened to be in and when she was not there, probably taking a vacation. I got bruised a lot, and when I did, there she was. She wanted to make sure I never forgot that she had predicted the outcome. She had tipped the scales toward the same outcome she was now boasting to have anticipated. I don't want to give the impression that my life has been hell. There are people that never receive such unpredictable visitors and still have doubts and sadness in life. And although she used to try often to convince me that I was unworthy of love, I knew I was. However, she has influenced me to make choices and decisions that could have been very different. From time to time, she came behind me, covered my eyes with her hands, but not entirely. I could still see through the spaces between open fingers, but my view was partial and the reality distorted. She continued to come back for years. She still does. And now here I am, looking at her across from me with a combination of contempt, anger, resignation, and compassion. I say the same thing, but with a softer voice. The bitch is back.
Awesome. Yes. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks to Lauren and Melissa and all the amazing readers tonight. Just a visual hurrah.
Gallery mode, hurrah.
Yeah, that was amazing and really uplifted my spirit. I've been feeling a little down with everything that's been happening. So I really appreciate all of the love in the chat and all of the readings. And it was such a joy to have Lauren and the ladies of Furious Gravity with us tonight.
Yeah, I'm loving the girl power here tonight. Am I allowed to say that? Sorry, Dan.
Yeah.
No, it's really amazing, and just you all speak to this beautiful community that's here, and Rachel and I say it all the time, we would be lost without you. So thank you for joining us. And thanks to everyone who dialed in and listened and encouraged each other in the chat. Yeah, we're here. You can reach us at hello@theinnerlooplit.org or online at the Inner Loop. We are open to ideas and suggestions for things that you need or want during these uncertain times.
And jump on those podcast apps and look up the Inner Loop Radio, because Courtney and I will be back with more inspiration for you all.
That's right. And virtually we'll be here again in August. So hit us up then. But thanks everyone one more round to all you awesome people. Thanks for sharing your evening with us. Oh, we'll have the recording available at some point too. So yeah. You can unmute if you want, but bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And everybody, thank you.
Hi, thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
What a great group.